Hello and Happy New Year. My name is Bryan Brewer. I'm the founder of Funding Quest, and I'm here today to give you a few tips about raising investor funding in 2019. I've worked with startup companies for over almost 20 years now, helped them raise well over $100 million in investor funding. And so I want to share today with you some of the tips about a few of the things that I see entrepreneurs where they make some mistakes or shortcomings. But first, let's take a look at 2019. It's still a very robust funding environment. The stock market, despite some recent fluctuations, is still very high, long-term gains for the past few years. And so there is still a lot of money available, but you never know what might happen. And if the stock market goes down, that means the amount of money available for angels to invest is going to shrink. And so if you're thinking about getting funding in 2019, I recommend that you start at it sooner rather than later. The other thing that I would say is there has been a proliferation of early stage funds. There's a lot of funds out there looking for good investment opportunities. So in addition to connecting with individual angels, check out some of these funds. They have a lot of money and they're interested in investing it in good deals. There's also a big trend that I'm sure you're aware of about women-led startups, and there are a few women-led funds that focus on investing in women-owned companies. And so, if you are a woman, this is also a very good time for you to get out there and just because of the nature of what's happening in society right now, and especially in the startup world, about wanting to help promote women to get more funding, you may be able to get some extra leverage. So, if that applies to you, take advantage of it. And often I'm asked the question, what are the hot sectors? Well, you know, some of the traditional ones that we see in the last year will continue. Anything that has to do with AI, machine learning, so blockchain is still hot. You know, mobile e-commerce, all those are hot software areas. AR, VR, robotics, IoT, if you get into the hardware space, those are all good. And biotech, genomics, agricultural technology, all those are hot sectors. But the point I want to emphasize is, even if you're in a more mundane sector, say manufacturing, consumer goods, or whatever, if you have a solid business plan and a good chance at succeeding, you can still attract money for your venture. So a few tips here. Number one, nail the basics. Make sure you have a complete set of documents that includes a business plan, detailed financial projections, a good pitch deck, and also make sure you have a term sheet. I was just talking to an entrepreneur recently who's interested in raising money, and that person, I said, do you have a term sheet? And the person said, no, I don't. And I said, well, you're not ready to raise money if you're not ready to put an offer on the table. Also, speaking of term sheets and your legal issues, make sure you work with an experienced attorney, someone who's been working with startups for a number of years and knows what they're doing. You'll get better service, and it will also signal to potential investors that legal work is being done properly if you're working with an experienced and well-known attorney. And then one thing to don't forget about is to prepare for due diligence, because once you start talking to investors and you start to get some interest, the savvy investors are going to say, well, I want to review all your documents and have some other questions for you. So be prepared for that. Have all your corporate documents and contracts and everything else available on a Dropbox folder or whatever that you can share privately with potential investors. Secondly, this applies not just to 2019, but it's something that I see many startups just not being able to accomplish, and that is to craft a compelling story. Much investors, first of all, want to make sure you have a fundable company, but once you cross that threshold, they want to see that you have, they're excited. They want to get excited about what you're doing. And a couple of ways that you can put an emotional hook into your pitch is to, number one, either tell a story if it's interesting about how you came up with the idea for your business. That's often that genesis story is often very interesting to investors and memorable. And then second, another way is if you have a customer success story. If you have someone who's really benefited from your business or what you're offering, in a tangible and distinct way, then that's also a good way to get an emotional hook in your pitch. So find just a few things about pitch. Keep it simple. Don't put too many words on the slide. You won't want people to read the slides while you're trying to talk to them, and practice your pitch and get feedback. Really, and always just be yourself. Don't try to memorize your pitch. Don't try to be someone else. Just be you and talk to investors about who you are and what your business is all about. Next tip has to do with your network. This is so critical. And I've seen entrepreneurs who are working away for months and months on their product, and they get ready to launch, and then they're ready to go out and get investors, and then they kind of come up for air and say, all right, where are the investors? Too late. It takes time to develop these relationships. So I encourage you to leverage your network now and continue building your contacts and build that up. And especially if you're going to be out raising money, treat it as a sales process and use a CRM, a customer relationship management tool, to keep track of all the contacts you make and the follow-up and so forth. The biggest complaint that I hear investors make about entrepreneurs in this process is the lack of follow-through and follow-up. Sometimes you're just leaving money on the table if you don't follow up and follow through. And then I also recommend that you polish your online presence, especially on LinkedIn. Make sure that, because investors will go to your LinkedIn profile, and first of all, make sure you have one, but they'll go to your profile and check you out and make sure that it looks good and that it presents you in the best light and shows relevant experience and background, especially if you can get recommendations and if you have a lot of connections. And finally, the last tip is make sure that your company is fundable before you go out and start pitching to investors. You can go out and talk to investors beforehand and ask for advice, but when you're ready with an ask, when you have a term sheet, make sure that your company is fundable, and that you've got the right balance between product market fit, or startup viability, as I call it. That you have a good business model, decent gross margins, and a good way to make money. That you have a sound marketing strategy. Also, the team is critical, and then make sure you have a reasonable deal. It's not has a way too high valuation that will cause investors to just skip you and look for a better deal. So. Finally, how do you know if you have a fundable company? Well, as some of you may know, I've made that easy for you. Go to mfctest.com and take the minimum fundable company test. It's 20 questions. It's free. It works for either a high growth company that's looking to be acquired eventually as an exit strategy, or for a cash flow business where you're going to pay dividends to your investors. So it's 20 multiple choice questions. You get your immediate results, and a lot of people have found it helpful, and it's free. So I encourage you to go sign up for the MFC test and take it. And finally, a little bit about me. I'm here in Seattle, Washington. I provide services, consulting services, and mentorship to startups through various programs. Just go to my website at funding-quest.com, and you get lots of details there. So, hope this helps. Thank you very much, and best wishes in your quest for funding. Thanks.